And so talking about the future of this field, what role does nanotechnology have in advancing drug design and delivery? And what characteristics of nanoparticles make them so appealing to this pharmaceutical industry?
Well, I'm not an expert in the nanotechnology area, but I can tell you something about the recent trends or the kind of literature which I have been following also. Is that there is a great interest in the nanotechnology, especially there are different, you call as tablet capsules for like conventional ones, but for nanotechnology, they have special words called as liposomes, exosomes, dendrimers, carbon nanotubes. So there has been a lot of interest in using those technologies or dosage forms for the drug delivery. And one of the benefits I see is that the drug is enclosed in kind of lipid molecules. So we have like more targeted delivery. So in let's say in tablet and capsules, you take tablet, it goes in stomach, it gets absorbed in the blood, and then it goes to the site of action. Let's say like maybe somewhere in the pain in your legs or something like that. But in case of the nanotechnology, you have like more targeted drug delivery. So drug delivery means that you coat those nanoparticles with some special polymers or some functional excipients, and it goes directly and binds to the site of action. It could be somewhere in your like brain or heart or lungs. So you deliver your drug specifically to one site. So there's like certain benefits you will have. You reduce some of the dose. So I'm not an expert, but yeah, these are like some of the benefits that you can have. But of course, it's not easy to formulate them, as far as I know. They come with like really big challenges.
And so just a quick follow up to that, you said this term functional excipients in the context of binding polymers to these nanoparticles. Could you just define that term for us and what exactly does that mean?
Well, it's not my area of expertise, but they use the term called functionalized, which means like it's more active and it tries to find the active site of binding. So it's called functionalizing means that let's say you have like just a lipid layer and you functionalize by like putting some kind of specific functional groups on the top of those surfaces. So it's the body or the kind of like the organ can identify those particles and it just binds specifically to that site. So I think that's what like it means about functionalization.
That makes sense. I think I've written a few papers about just different nanoparticles, and they usually functionalize it in order to make it more biocompatible for like gold nanoparticles, for example. So it seems like you always need to attach something onto a nanoparticle to make sure that it achieves its specific applications.
Yeah, exactly. That's correct. And I think that that's what the functionalization means, that like it's like more inert and it could be taken up by any site of or any organ.
Yeah.
But then you functionalize with specific kind of polymers or some chemical entities. And it's like it's more specific to that for that organ.
So let's transition back to more of your expertise and just your opinion in general. What do you think the future of drug delivery product design looks like in this pharmaceutical space? And how can that future be achieved by applying the paradigms and principles of material science and engineering?
Well, the field has been quite evolving a lot. And I mentioned that the patent on the tablet machine was in 1850 somewhere. But then from that, it evolved to like a rotary tablet press where you have like tablets made at really like very high speed. And that was like a batch process. And now it has involved continuous manufacturing. So I think it's a kind of a gradual evolving, and it's just not continuous manufacturing, but I have seen like people have been trying the continuous crystallization also. So process has been evolving, and of course, the materials that you use or that you have been using for the batch process may or may not work for the continuous processing. So you need to upgrade your own materials and your additives. Maybe they don't fit for that purpose, and then you need to make them smart. You need to make those excipients more smart in a way that they can be handled in both ways. Imagine like if I'm using one of the materials which is like more specific batch, but I cannot use in the other one, then I need to make those materials more smart. So it could be like co-process excipients, where you mix two excipients or two additives together, where you get like some more better qualities. So yes, material science, and that's where the crystal engineering principles also come into the picture, where you try to develop a smart APIs, where you try to modify the properties of API from the starting based upon your need, what you need.
Can you define smart materials in this specific context? I know that they're generally materials that can respond to external stimuli and then they can change their geometries or their properties in some way. How is that applicable in this drug and pharmaceutical area?
Well, I have just talked about only like tablet and capsules, but when you talk about the advancement, there is a great interest in additive manufacturing. It's also called as 3D printing. And
Tom
and
just
if
got
you
super
just
excited there.
One of my favorite areas.
So if you try to like do a literature search, there is a being great interest in the 3D printing, or it's called as additive manufacturing, and also the concept called personalized medicines. So it's a kind of emerging trend, and people have been like talking more about that one. And when you talk about like 3D printing, then yeah, the polymers play a role because you have to pass through kind of heated filament, and then you have to melt. But then you see there's a limitation that you cannot heat everything; it might degrade. Yeah, so there is always like a benefits and disadvantages like associated, but that's where like the other materials can come into the picture.
I wasn't expecting to get into additive manufacturing at all in this episode. So, always fun when we do.
And one more thing is that, I mean, so far we have been just talking about tablet and capsules and that's additive manufacturing, other things. But material science is just not limited to that one. It's also beyond that one. You have to think about how you're going to pack your medicines. So let's say I'm going to pack something on aluminum foil or plastics. It has to be more sustainable because you cannot use all the materials. Not just sustainability, you have to also think about whether that packing will withstand in the kind of really kind of hot and humid conditions of some countries, or really cold and like other countries. So you have to think about like packing materials. It has to be not permeable, it has to be like impermeable, it has to be like child-proof. There are a lot of even though it's child-proof, but then when you talk about old age patients, it should be like really easy for them to operate also. So
it's the opposite end of that spectrum.
So I mean, I just wanted to highlight that it's just not on the product design, but it's also beyond that one, and that's all is being considered when you think about when you design a pharmaceutical product.
It's crazy how science and material science principles just infiltrate every part of the design process there, from just making the drug to how you get it to the place where it can actually be taken by the patients. That's really fascinating. And so we talk a good amount about computational material science on the show as well, just because computing is the name of the game these days. And, we're doing this recording over the internet as well. So, I mean, it's the era we live in. But, our researchers in this space looking into creating a comprehensive computational framework to combine molecular materials and process models required for these pharmaceutical manufacturing approaches. And what would this look like, and how would this close some of the gaps that are currently present in the industry in any part of it?
As far as I know, there has been a lot of computational work being done in the pharmaceutical space, especially when you talk about process engineering also, where people have been simulating using, I'm not really good expert in that one, but I know like people have been using computational fluid dynamics to see how the coating happens, or like when you're coating using some different airs. And also I have seen some papers where they have been like trying to simulate how the tablet making process and try to understand how the powder compress. And that tablet shapes are like really different. It could be triangular, it could be oblique, it could be oval, it could be capsule shape. There are different shapes that are been involved like in making tablets. So people have been like trying to simulate those things and try to understand. So as far as I know, there has been a lot of computational tools and the simulations that had been used a lot in the pharmaceutical industry to close that gaps, or maybe to get a better understanding. And one of the benefit I see using those is that you don't have to use the materials a lot. That's going to save a lot of time, also the resources, and it will bring down the expenses also. So, and that's like one way how you can also bring down the cost of your products also.
Right, because if you can reduce the number of physical experiments, then you're also saving on time and in addition to money. So that's even more potential there for the computational science in this area.
Yeah, and apart from the computer science, there's also a big interest nowadays. If you go through the LinkedIn also, that people have been talking about artificial intelligence, data sciences, because now we have a tableting process which goes like really fast with few thousand tablets per hour. So one of the way to have better control is using the PAT tools, which is also known as process analytical tools. So you have a lot of sensors. It could be infrared or Raman that are being like put in different positions. They are monitoring your powder flow or content uniformity. So you generate a lot of database. And then you need to analyze those database also. So that has been a great interest in data sciences and trying to do the predictions or get better control of your process using or maybe feeding those data into artificial intelligence.
Can you talk about the predictions a little more? What kind of things could you predict by doing this Raman spectroscopy during this batch processing?
Well, not specifically with the Raman, but at least I can talk about the crystallography. Is that
Sure.
there has been some papers like from late 80s or 90s also, where people have been looking at the crystal structure and the molecular interactions between them. And they have been trying to link those properties with the mechanical properties. So, and that's where the analogy always comes into picture. And one of the most common term is being used in organic crystals is called slip planes. So when you talk about slip planes, where you have like a more like structure where the planes can slide over each other, it's quite well known in the pharma that such organ crystals have good plasticity, and it's often associated with the good tableting properties also. But when you have kind of raw mesh-like structure like tetragonal or like in carbon, where it will resist the deformation, then yes, you know that it's not going to make tablets. And another technique has been used nowadays is called nanoindentation also. I think it's quite often used in metallurgy called indentation creep test.
Of note, microindentation tests are a rapid method to study the mechanical behavior of materials.
So
Mhm.
as I told before, yeah, there are a lot of like techniques or calculation tools that has been borrowed from the different fields and has been utilized. Of course, the way the materials, the inorganic behave is completely different than the organic crystals because organic crystals are really complex, a lot of interactions. So data interpretation would be different, but yeah, the principle are more or less same. And those principles has been used to kind of classify different materials. And based upon that classification, you can choose or you can predict some of the material properties.
So it
Yeah.
sounds like this, the computational science side of this will really allow for us to tame this complicated beast that is, classifying and understanding all these complex organic crystals that you have to deal with in your work.
Yeah, and also when I talk about polymorphism, there has been always a growing interest about the crystal structure predictions. So it's an international body called IUCR. I don't remember the frequency, but they have kind of blind test and people participate and they just give you a molecule and then you have to predict how many polymorphs it can have.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a challenge being given out, and people they develop their own kind of algorithms and softwares where they can do the crystal structure predictions. And from that, you can compare with your experimental that, okay, I got this many polymorphs. And that could be something like more stable polymorph because there has been some literature reports. If you can go back in the literature and see that there has been instances that people have been working on specific polymorph. It was in the market, and then suddenly a stable polymorph came out in the product. And the consequences was that like maybe the tablet broke or doesn't have good solubility or it doesn't absorb well in the body
Yeah.
and it has to be recalled. So that's why crystal structure prediction has become like a really kind of important tool in the pharma industry also. And once we have the crystal structure, and when we talk about crystallography, then at least we have some basic knowledge in the literature that if we have certain structure properties, then yeah, material should behave in this manner. And that's how like people have been harnessing those knowledge in the predictions.
It's
Wow, yeah.
incredible to me that there's so many factors that come into play when you have to figure out like the structure and just the effectiveness, the performance of a material in a specific application. So it's just crazy to me that we're progressing towards achieving more of that. And just with this modeling, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, that's all super cool.
So I mean, if I want to like summarize this, like all those interlinks between them, you can think about a material science tetrahedron. So I think it should be there in your field also.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, we've seen it.
And I love that one material science tetrahedron, specifically where I like to put the crystal structure on the top. And you
Yeah.
have like the three legs, it's kind of like properties, processing, and it's all interlinked. You cannot separate
Right.
one from each other.
No.
And once you have like a better understanding about the performance processing and properties and structure, I mean, that gives you a really robust process. Well, it's really challenging to have a complete understanding because there are certain factors you cannot understand at all. You cannot explain. But that's how like I would see like completing material science tetrahedron would give you like a really nice understanding of the materials.